I suffer from two very unhealthy compulsions. The first one is called post-traumatic embitterment disorder, and the other one is cyber stalking. So I have a problem um, not only with bitterness, but also stalking people who I am embittered towards. So these two things kind of go hand in hand. People with PTED will stalk um, the people who they are bitter towards, and they're basically just suffering all the time. Like, this is something that drives me crazy, and thinking logically doesn't really help. It's kind of like there's this logical part of my mind that knows that, the relationship is over, we're not friends anymore. Um, this is just a mess. There's no point in trying to resolve it, or you know um, putting so much stock into what these people think. And yet there's this emotional part of my mind that I can't stop, that's like always there, and it's like this compulsion that um, it's like a fire that just won't go out. There's just nothing that will help. Um, there are no like techniques or tricks or anything to make it go away. And so I'm constantly reliving these scenarios, these failed social interactions, and I'm trying to find some way of resolving it somehow. Now, these disputes that I have with these people, it's not just pure victimization. I don't just view myself as a victim. I don't view the situation as one-dimensional. Um, and it's not just a feeling of bitterness or anger. It's sort of a feeling that it's sort of like a cycle of different feelings that just doesn't really stop. So in one moment I'm extremely furious, and in another moment I feel shame, I feel humiliation, I feel guilt, I feel lonely. I miss these people. I somehow, I don't know, I want some way to fix what happened. And it's like there are no options. It's just every option doesn't work. And so I'm just kind of in this prolonged, indecisive state of mind. Now, the effect of this trauma doesn't really seem to let up. Um, I have hated someone for the last 6 years, and I literally feel the same way that I did back in around New Year's of 2020. I still feel exactly the same way. Um, and I still have nightmares about it, and it just doesn't stop. The worst part is that I can't really get help for it, because it's like autistic white nationalist internet drama. And so it's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna talk about this with Mr. Noseberg. So I've had to study this topic. I've had to study trauma. I've had to really go back into my own past and try to really understand the way that I work, and really understand where a lot of my compulsions come from. And so I've had a really big interest in narcissistic personality disorder, and homosexuality, because I really feel like these two issues um, tell us a lot about trauma. That's not to say that I'm a narcissist or homosexual, um, but traumatized people act sort of like narcissists and homosexuals. For one thing, narcissists have this like very all-pervasive need to be mirrored. So to be mirrored by just random people, random feedback, right? They need to get, a certain number of views to feel good about themselves. They have to make sure that they compare well to other people in their community. And in this way, they sort of use other people as sort of what's called a self object, basically a kind of stand in parent. And this is also what you find with homosexuals. Homosexuals, um, they try to they try to find someone that can mirror them in sort of a compensatory way. So homosexuals, they tend to look for sort of like an idealized version of who they wish they were. That's basically the ideal man to them. I have really bad allergies, so if it sounds like I'm crying, I'm basically coughing through this entire thing, so I have to constantly stop the recording. Now, according to Joseph Nicolosi, the typical peak fantasy of a homosexual um, is basically like you have this incredible idealized man that's like looking them dead in the eyes and is basically saying like you're awesome, you're cool, you're this, you're that, um, basically complimenting them. And this is basically the parental gaze. Now, in my case, in my early 20s, I became like really obsessed with older women. Um, and it was really strange because I noticed that whenever um, some lady would say I'm handsome or I'm strong or they just be excited to see me, they'd just be really happy and compliment me or whatever. It would be like I would get like completely overwhelmed with desire. And so I tried to actually get into relationships with older women. Um, I had one online, and I guess I'd still be interested in it. But one thing that I noticed was that and this is what you find with homosexuality. Like when I really articulated what I wanted, it was always something emotional. Like it was like cuz I obviously like older women just based on like how they look. Because like a pretty older woman probably has like better genes. But there was just this emotional um core that I needed to satisfy. And it was like the more that I thought about it, um, the more that I realized I really wanted it, and I was kind of obsessed with like I kind of had this like desperation that I wanted some older woman to like hug me or run her fingers through my hair and just be like nice to me and like console me and so on and so forth. But then what happened was like the more I explored this, the more that I focused on the peak moments of the fantasy, um and I really just like revisited the trauma that caused that fetish, the less appealing it was. So it went from being sexy to being like just kind of gross, not appealing, sort of like viewing older women clearly, where they're not so appealing. They're kind of worn out, they're kind of tired. Um, they're not at their peak, right? And that desperation just kind of disappeared. Um, and that's not to say that it doesn't come back, but this is probably what Nicolosi means when he says that he can reverse people's sexuality. That the fetish just becomes kind of not interesting. It becomes less sexy. Um, the eroticization just isn't happening anymore. Now, I can give you my theory as to like how this actually works, but what I do want to emphasize is that like yes, I did want that maternal gaze. That's what I was interested in. And so there's a problem of mirroring. And beyond the gaze, there's just a general um need, a compulsion, a craving for someone that's like me, someone that can relate to me, someone that I can be myself around. Um, I think this really comes from having such a lonely childhood because, I grew up in a very small town with like a very small school, and whatever normies were available there, that was what you had to work with. Now, that's not to say that I felt like I was above everyone else. Um, but there was always this barrier. There was always um this sort of gray zone where I couldn't really, express myself. So yeah, I could have friends. I could have good relationships with people, but I couldn't really be myself around people. I couldn't really get mirroring or feedback. And so, you know, people weren't really all that interesting to me. And I kept trying over and over and over again to like somehow make a connection, but it just wasn't really working. And because I was such a socially awkward person, um, I obviously drew a lot of ire from people. And so I basically spent all of my time alone as a child. Um, I every day after school I would just go out into the woods, and that was basically it. That's basically all I would do. Um, and so when I got out of high school, I never contacted anyone. I don't have any contacts from anyone I grew up with. I just don't really have any attachment to them. I would say that my first real friend, the first person who really took an interest in me and could mirror back everything that I was saying, he was this hipster guy that I met when I was like 19. And he lived in Brooklyn. And I would meet up with him, and I would just have so much fun because we were both on the same wavelength. And so we had these like really long conversations with each other. We were always on the phone with each other for many hours every day. And I just really had so much fun with him. And unfortunately, he and I just we had a fight over something, and it just never recovered. And I mean, I still think about him to this day. It's just really sad what happened. I later realized that he was like lying to me, and he also had like really really serious issues, but I digress. I noticed that I was like very clingy though. Like I've always been like really clingy with my friends. Like nowadays I actually like have a lot of friends. They're all online, but like we have like a very close friendship, and sometimes like we'll send each other gifts. That was my idea. And like my best friend is this guy named KK, or Neanderthal. He's from Poland, and so like around Christmas or each other's birthdays or whatever, we'll send each other something. Um, and we've been friends for a very, very long time. But again, I notice like I'm just like very, very clingy um with the people in my life. But like 6 years ago, I had this parasocial relationship with a YouTuber. We were friends for close to a year. Um, and it was just like this really uncomfortable and confusing, this sort of like one-sided friendship where he would kind of treat me like an employee, or like I don't know, just like not even like a person. Like he just like total apathy, just like total indifference. Um and like he would like insult me. Like he would sometimes, like not often, like very occasionally, like he would like insult me, and like he was always talking to me like I was stupid. And I remember one time I told him about how I lost my friendship with that guy from Brooklyn, and how he was like an uncle to me, and this guy just thought it was funny. Like to him it was hilarious. And that's kind of when I realized that something was really wrong with him, because that's not like it wasn't like the friendship ended and like something really funny happened. It was like the fact that something like that happened to me, the fact that I was suffering, that was what was so hilarious to him. And I was just so shocked by this that like I just at that point I just kind of gave up, and I just stopped talking to him. And then like a few weeks later, he comes back to me, and he's being like super nice to me and wants to know what's up and blah blah. And he wants me to help him with like a business idea, and I just told him no. I wasn't mean about it, but I told him, it wasn't like I didn't think it was a good idea or whatever. But this like I tried again. I tried to open up a conversation or something, because the first time that we talked, um like back when we first started talking, like we had this like really long conversation, and I was so happy because this person was so much like me. Like this person, I'm pretty sure this person is like a distant relative of mine, because like I later because like for a large number of reasons. But I also later found out that my cousin actually used to watch him, and it was weird because he reminded me so much of my cousin, like the way that he looked, um, like just like the way his like body looked. Like it's just sort of like kind of frumpy, nerdy. It looked like my cousin, and it was sort of like talking to my cousin. Um, and I later found out that this guy has like the same ancestry as me. Um, and there were just so many of these little coincidences, like these very specific behaviors that he would do. It was like a very big stack of like very specific behaviors that he would do that I would do. And the other thing was that he thought the same way that I do. Like he had the same way of thinking about things. And that was what I was looking for. I was looking for someone like me that I could break through to. Like someone that could actually understand what I'm talking about and like mirror that back to me. Because whenever I talk to people, I always feel like I'm crazy because it always goes in one ear and out the other. Like even when I'm talking to like all these other white nationalists, um, I know that they don't see things exactly the way that I do. I know that they can't, they don't entirely understand what I'm talking about. And so to meet someone um who I guess kind of represents what I've always been looking for, which is like, a real friend, which is someone that mirrors back clean feedback. And so in some way this is sort of narcissistic because it's sort of like I'm using this person like sonar to confirm that I'm not crazy and that I exist. And so I was using this person as sort of um a twinship self object. And I had this like really intense need to get that feedback, get that mirroring, which I've just never had, which I've just never been able to um acquire. And so I would write these like very long spurgy messages. Now I tried to keep them as short as possible, but it just made him angry, and it was just really humiliating because I couldn't get this person to talk to me. And so it was sort of like a bad mirror. And this person frankly just hated me. Just saw me as just a fool, just a goober. And so this was extremely painful and traumatizing because imagine going through your whole life always being treated like a fool and a goober, and then you're vulnerable with someone who you finally trust that this person can give you um the feedback that you're not crazy, and this person just treats you like a goober and a fool, and takes your art without crediting, and takes something nice that you were trying to do for them and like turns it into a job, and then blocks you when you try to stand up for yourself and not let them talk to you like a dog. Still, I'm really embarrassed by it. I think it's embarrassing how much I fixated on someone I hardly even knew, and then proceeded to ruminate on them for 6 years. Of course, This is complicated by the fact that I later realized that this person was a pedophile, um, which explains a lot because pedophiles um, lack empathy. And what happened was I was like connecting dots because I realized that something was wrong with him. Like that's the thing. Like I realized early on that there was something not quite right about him. And so I slowly put the pieces together. I did research. I played with keywords, and then I found a whole bunch of like accounts that he was making. And he was like he had like a Pixiv account where he was like looking at like drawings of like little boys, little girls, and I actually had to report him to the NCMEC. So that door is closed. But dealing with the actual PTED and like trying to move on from it, I had to take a look at what typically causes PTED. Now, apparently, and I don't think there's even any ambiguity on this on the Wikipedia. They just say that it's caused by a contradiction in your deepest deepest held values or beliefs. And so the way that this person treated me contradicted something that I must have believed. And I think that was the idea that um, by getting myself in order, by becoming someone, by showing off my skills, my gifts, my intellect, whatever, that I could receive approval from someone who I felt was worthy. And so I'm parentifying this person. I'm holding this person up as this judge for my actual worth as a person. And so that's where all of this hatred and resentment comes from. I'm constantly litigating my case in court, and the judge is not being very fair to me. The judge, I mean, I could reach out to this person, but I just know this person would never, this person would basically just treat me with apathy and contempt, and it wouldn't really go anywhere. And they just wouldn't, they would not listen to a word that I have to say. They're just not interested and they don't care. And it's like this person knows that that gets under my skin and he kind of likes it. He kind of thinks it's funny in kind of a sick way. And that's why his way of dealing with me is more um detached, you know, like he doesn't like to use my name. He likes to call me like guy, buddy, dude. And that was an interesting thing about him. He would never ever use my name. Like even after nearly a year of talking to each other, he would not use my name. But it's like I'm holding this person up as like um sort of like a judge, sort of like a parent. And so it's not really about him. It's more like um I'm looking for some sort of objective judge, someone that can completely understand what I'm talking about, that completely understands all the nuances of me and can judge me objectively. And what I realized was that I could use the logical part of my mind as sort of like a parent, and the emotional part of my mind is sort of like the child, just sort of the inner child that is in need. And I sort of use this logical part to console this inner child because that's actually what they do in reintegrative therapy. Someone that's suffering from same-sex attraction or binge eating or pornography addiction, whatever, they have them first identify sort of like the peak moment or the purest expression of whatever their compulsion is. And then they peel back the layers. They identify the original unmet need, and they kind of like console um that inner child. And I know that's very cliche. I know the idea of like repressed memories and trauma and inner child and all that stuff. Like that sounds like psych babble. That sounds like nonsense that comes from liberals and egalitarians. It does seem to be real. Okay, this does what I'm saying here, it seems to be real. The cliches that have been passed around about psychology, for whatever you think about psychology, for whatever you think about all the flaws of psychology, or the genes versus environment debate, there does seem to be something there. Okay, but in reintegrative therapy, they have you console this quote unquote inner child, whatever that is. There's probably a more intellectual way of putting it. Um, and that's sort of how they relieve these compulsive behaviors. And what I did was I simply started to console myself with this objective, this rational part of my brain that is very aware of the kind of person that I am, that is very aware of all of the nuances of um, what I'm trying to do, and like the context of everything. And this part can say, um, "You are good enough. It's okay," etc., etc. And this really worked. Um, the feelings of resentment and hatred and bitterness, they disappeared. And I felt like I could forgive this person. Of course, that's not to say that there's not two sides to this. Um, there's obviously some things that I should have apologized for, but you get the idea. Like I could let go of my half. Now that's not to say that the compulsion, um, that the obsession is totally gone, because the other half of it is I actually just really feel bad for this person, because this person um, is suffering too, and that's really, the whole thing is just really morally confusing for me, because like I found this terrible thing that they were doing, but it also comes from, I also later learned it came from some traumatic experiences this person went through. Um, and so I honestly just want this person to get help. But I know like I have to keep that door closed. But at the very least, I could just let go of this person and forgive them for the way that they treated me, in their half of it. But trauma is very real. I really recommend reading Kabi Nagata. She had this series called um My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. And in this series, she's this it's like a memoir, kind of confessional manga basically. And she's basically this autistic Japanese woman, and she basically describes her sexuality without any um without any ideology. So she doesn't have this need to like censor what she's actually feeling. She's just describing it accurately. And this was like really kind of a red pill for me because you read this and you realize how all of these compulsive behaviors that she has. She's a binge drinker. She's cutting herself. She has anorexia, um, bulimia, etc. She later like paid like a lesbian escort, to like have sex with her or whatever. And what happened was she realized that she really didn't like the sex, like she wasn't really that into it, but she really liked when the woman would like hug her and stuff. And so she started paying them to just like hug her. And she described how she wanted like this older woman to like like love her and this and that. But basically she wanted like a mommy in her life. But it was so fascinating because you could tell that the compulsions were traumatic because she would do things like she would when she was at work, she would run into a different room and she would take some like dry ramen noodles and she would start eating them and she would just eat them until like her mouth was bloody. So there's something, it's almost like trauma is sort of like a haunting of the body. And when you're traumatized, you have all of these just strange, irrational behaviors that just you don't really have like a lot of control over. So like for instance, kleptomania, or compulsive shopping, or um, in my case, like cyber stalking, or or gambling, or thrill seeking, or whatever. Because it's sort of like there's this disconnect between this logical part of your brain and this emotional part that has like a lot of veto power over the rational part. And so it can kind of push the logical part out of the way. It's just sort of like force you to do things that you don't want to do. Um, as in the case of like autistic inertia, because I actually have autistic inertia, and what happens is like, I'll wake up and I really want to go to the bathroom, but I can't. I'm just like stuck in bed because there's this emotional part of my mind. It's like this subconscious layer that like forces me to stay there, to stay put. Um, and so I can't like my executive powers are limited. And this is what Joseph Nicolosi talks about with homosexuality. There's sort of like this disconnect between um the mind and the body. And he sort of equates the subconscious with the body. And so homosexuals will have problems like you know being pee shy, like, which is an issue that I have. Like I cannot use urinals in public places. um I think it's gross anyways. I think it's pretty gross to do that. Like I'll do it in the woods. I won't do it in public place. It's just kind of uncivilized. But I do suffer from compulsions. Like like I have a really really terrible pornography addiction, like masturbation addiction. I do it like, I don't know, between 6 and 10 times a day. And there's nothing normal about that. That's too many times. That's just like, that cannot be healthy. But it's like I have this weird relationship with women where whenever I see like a pretty woman, like I get so anxious, and it's like I have to like do something about it. And I often notice that there's like a tightness in my chest. And this is basically what Nicolosi talks about with homosexuality. Like homosexuals, they often get like a tightness in their chest when they're confronted with masculine men. And they have these very, very, very promiscuous lifestyles. And so it's really just that disconnection between um, the brain and the body where, the body and its stupid ideas went out. Now, I guess I should explain how I think that trauma gets eroticized and sort of how that works. Now, to do this, you have to really look at George Zipf. He wrote the book Human Behavior and the Principle of Least Effort. He basically talks about how all systems are highly economical. For example, when speaking, we use many short words that have many meanings and few long words that have highly specific meanings. And that's just a very economical distribution. And you find this everywhere. You find, many of this and few of that in sort of like a harmonic distribution. So like the size of towns and cities, you'll have like few big cities and many small towns, and so on and so on. So whenever you look at a system, it is trying to economize effort. All of the decisions that we make are intended to minimize the total amount of effort overall. Well, a human is a system, and this system wants to reproduce. The thing is, we can't reproduce all the time. And so we have to go out and get things in order to later reproduce. So, for example, we have to go out and get food, we have to go out and get water, we have to socialize, we have to build shelter, grow crops, plan for the future, etc. And so we we divide our want into a bunch of sub wants like hunger, thirst, greed, loneliness, boredom, etc. And so when you want an apple, what you really want is to go and reproduce. It's just that the apple is sort of in the way. In order to go out and reproduce, you first have to deal with the apple. And this is sort of an economical arrangement. But what happens when you get traumatized is that a lot of times the original unmet need gets suppressed, right? Gets suppressed along with the memory. So if like, your mother was abusive to you, maybe you wanted your mother to, be nice to you, console you, this, that, and the other thing. And so that want gets suppressed along with the memory. And what happens is that later in life, when you come across something that triggers that repressed experience, what happens is that the unmet need is now out of context. And so it gets expressed as basically your true desire, which is lust. And so the fetish is sort of like it's sort of like a desire out of context. And the reason why um, reintegrative therapy works is because it gets you to recontextualize your wants. So they go from being very general to being very specific. And so when I see pretty women, that makes me like hypersexual because I had lots of bad experiences with girls growing up where, I was a socially awkward kid and the girls were like they were all about the rules, right? They're all about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And if you break any of their rules, then they're going to treat you narcissistically. And so encountering a pretty woman, it kind of puts you into a state of performance. And that's probably why it makes me anxious and also horny at the same time. And so I can't just like appreciate a pretty woman and just like, move on with my day. It's like I had to like, bookmark the image, um, or save the image or something. It's like I can't really get any relief. And so I'm curious to what extent that could be mitigated. Of course, with reintegrative therapy, the rate of success is typically um it's about a third. So with homosexuals, like about a third of them it'll reverse their attraction, and a third it'll reduce their same-sex impulses, and like another third it won't help at all. And in my opinion, that's probably because of the simple fact that there's lots of experiences that you simply cannot remember no matter what. I'm not going to remember every single time that I was put into an abusive situation just simply because of how many there were. And so trauma therapy is a lot of work. You really got to, become self-aware, and you have to do a lot of thinking, remembering, maybe like talking to people that knew you, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, my goal is just to become a better person and to become more self-aware and really just heal as a person, be at peace with myself. And I think that being at peace with yourself is really important as a nationalist because in order to win, we have to use our intelligence. Now, what is intelligence? Intelligence is not IQ. It's not the G factor. IQ, G factor, that's intelligence in a particular context. Intelligence really means economy of action. It's the number of operations that an object can perform. For example, when you look at a mushroom, like the mushroom grows, it eats detritus, and it releases spores. And so we look at that and go, well, that object can only do a very small number of actions. And so we think that mushrooms are unintelligent. But then when we examine their root networks, then we go, oh, look at all these sophisticated things that they can do. This is sort of almost like sort of an alien intelligence with its own language and society, and so intelligence is subjective in one sense, but it can also be objectively compared, as when, we compare IQ scores. By becoming humble, by becoming self-aware, by becoming open to criticism, you increase the number of things that you can do. And in this sense, you become more intelligent. People that are not self-aware, people that are arrogant, um, their IQ is wasted on them. They can do so little with what they have. So that's my advice to you guys. Become self-aware, become honest, and really try to work on your personal trauma. Try to become a better person. It will literally make you smarter.